You often use the phrase, and I know it's not coined by you, but it's a philosophy that you teach and live by, as I try to model myself. So you can have any life you want, but you've got to give up the life you have
Hmm.
to receive it. And I feel clicking and I have more clarity around that because I don't think it's material in a sense where
Hmm.
when I heard this, I can't remember if it was for me or someone else a couple of years ago, I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? Like leave you and leave my family? And like, we kind of did that. We like uprooted our lives 10 years ago to California to get a new life, quote unquote. Not
Hmm.
that we were necessarily, I don't know, we didn't necessarily have that kind of quote in the
Yeah,
background.
exactly.
We just knew we wanted something different. Um, but we focus so much as humans on the material because that's what we can see. And that is what our analytical brains
Yeah.
can kind
It's
of
it's
comprehend.
easy to quantify.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense when you can see it. But I truly believe that to give up the life that you have is just a destruction, really, a beautiful destruction,
Hmm.
as I always say, of who you believe yourself to be so that you can transform into the person that you want to be. Because you hear this a lot from people who are in, the wellness space, spirituality, doctors, psychologists, and things. You know, if I, for example, so say I wasn't happy in our relationship. I
Hmm.
mean, we have our tips, there are triggers. It's all a reflection of me and what I need to really work on myself. But if I got so angry and I was like, I'm just going to leave Dan, start over brand new, I'm not necessarily transforming within me the patterns that particularly maybe need to be either accepted, changed, healed, rewired. So if I go find, Joe Cool in my new life, I think what would happen is he would just reflect back to me the additional
Yeah.
problems that are still going in my mind. That's why, people jump from job to job and they're always can be unhappy
Yeah.
or
It's
relationship
like
to
the
relationship.
same patterns. It's the same problems at the new job, the same problems in the new relationship.
Yeah. And I think that I feel the last 2 years has really put this into perspective for me
Hmm.
because I do not know who I am. I don't know who I am. And it's almost, I'm sort of happy that I don't anymore.
Hmm.
And it's because you also have a really great point as when we have such a narrow myopic view on life and reality, that's all you can see.
Yeah.
So if I believe myself to be one thing and label or a bunch of certain labels, and I have a very straight narrow myopic view of myself, but I'm multidimensional and there are things that I really like and don't like, and they're constantly changing.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it because I'm beginning to understand that the diversity is almost allowing me to trust myself more and not be so rigid with labels and identifying what I like, what I don't like, eat this, eat that, go here, go there. You're more, I think I'm understanding the flow of life more in this
Yeah.
aspect.
I think that makes a lot of sense. We kind of started off saying you can have any life you want, but it's going to cost you your old life.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very similar to what you were saying. With a lot of these like lines I use when I'm coaching people and just ideas that have come to me over the years, it was almost like it starts out as like it makes a little bit of sense to me.
Mm,
And so like for me it was like literally it was like a strictly physical thing where it's like coaching people and it's like, yeah, you can have any life you want, but you're going to have to give up your old habits and your old diet and maybe your old workout routine or lack of workout routine, and you're going to have to sacrifice maybe some of your free time so you can go work out. And it was very, very material. and very like physical. And I kind of coached that for a while until like over a similar period, over the last 2 years, maybe 5 years, 10 years, who knows? But there's been this process playing out of very similar, this beautiful destruction of me, kind of like the way I see the world has been changing, the way I see myself has been changing, the way I see coaching has been changing, the way I see everything, the way I see this podcast. Everything is constantly evolving. And I've come to see almost like all these little, like, I don't even want to say like cliches, like these little sayings that I use, little quotes, like everything is everything. I've talked about on the podcast before, where it like, at first I was like, oh yeah, everything's interconnected, everything's related. And then you start to realize and understand it deeper. And it means that, oh no, everything is literally everything. Every cell is a universe. It's fractals, and we live in this holographic universe. And I don't want to get too into that right now. But with all these different things, I realized that this whole time I've been coaching myself. And it was almost like my higher self has been saying things to me. And I've been like, oh, perfect. I kind of get that. I'll teach people it, rather than like really sitting with it and being like, how does this relate to my life? And you can have any life you want, but it's going to cost you your old one. Might be like the most prevalent of all of them, because like you're saying, as it's evolved and I've started to see who I can become, it's been hard for me to let go of who I used to think I was in order to become that. So very often, like even still, things will come up. There'll be a big decision that needs to be made, or an opportunity, or whatever it is. And I'll catch myself anxious about it, or panicking, or worrying. And then I stop myself and I'm like, well, who is perceiving this as negative? Is it who I'm choosing to be? Is it sort of like my ideal version of myself? Or is it just an old version of me? Is it me from 3 years ago that doesn't like this opportunity for me because it's not the same as what he knows? Because there's a part of me that only knows like linear time and the experiences that I've been through. And he's going to perceive a new opportunity as scary. Whereas the version of myself who I'm becoming and who I am a lot of the time will perceive that same opportunity as exciting. And there's a big difference between scary and exciting, but a lot of times those feelings are the same, like internally, somatically. We feel the same feeling in our like restriction, tightness in our chest, the same kind of worry, the same like sweat and like shaking. And it's like, are you like shaking with excitement, or are you like shaking out of fear? It's the same feeling. And it's like everything happens, and then we have our story about it. And very often, if we're allowing the version of ourselves who we used to be to dictate what that experience is, we're going to perceive it and experience it in one way. And if we allow the version of ourselves who we are becoming to perceive it, they're going to perceive it in a very different way.
Yes.
So it gets really, really deep, and it gets really, really confusing sometimes when you're sort of oscillating back and forth between who you used to be and who you want to be, or who you're becoming. And that gets really, really confusing when you're trying to define yourself and be like, this is who I am. This is what I like. Ooh, but maybe I like that.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. Well, it's all about the stories that we tell ourselves. That's how we perceive who we are, which is the personality that our egos created for us to keep us safe and keep us in the illusion of who we think we are.
Yeah.
Peter Cron, I was listening to him on a podcast, and he said the ego's sole job is to protect the identity that it has created for itself and to be right about it. So there has been so much that has changed for me, not only over like maybe a 6 months period, but like if we kind of zoom back out in a 2-year period. It's almost too much to talk about on the podcast, right, to be honest. But how crazy this life is that I thought for some reason I could control it.
Right?
It's actually very comical, because and this I think is, this was probably like the nocebo effect. when we moved to California, we said we will never move
Yep.
back
Yeah.
to
I 100%
Massachusetts.
believe that.
And now, obviously, a lot ensued over this 2-year period that we've been in Massachusetts. But looking back at it, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my mother was diagnosed with cancer, lung cancer. We made the decision to move back. Literally a month later, my brother died suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't even got into Massachusetts yet, but that was kind of like the second, like, okay, probably time to be back home with family. And 6 weeks after that, my uncle passed away. And from the cancer that my mother had, there was just an onslaught of shit show.
Mm-hmm.
I think she had 7 major surgeries in like less than a year. And then last year, because we're June, this is coming out in June, last year, my cousin died suddenly, who I was closer with than my brother. She literally was my sister. And that, I would say that broke me. It really did. And I remember speaking to an integration coach after getting back from our trip to Costa Rica last year. Because when Nikki, my cousin, died last June, being there with her moments before she passed away was a really surreal experience. And I wholeheartedly, again, don't know why I was there. A lot, anyone who's listened to the show, like I explained this entire scenario in one of the episodes that we taped at the end of last year, explaining that I wasn't supposed to be there. I was like going home that day from Colorado. But anyways, in her passing, you're in when we don't talk about grief very much, and I'm not certainly a professional in grief or anything. I've just experienced it and can say that like it is a very valid emotion, and probably one that I obviously required to learn through over that period of time with all of the deaths. And you do grieve, even though my mother's still alive, you almost grieve that part of her that's not the 30-year-old mom that you have that you're used to seeing, because the roles reversed. Like I was her caretaker. Like she was at one point, she was like the size of my arm. Like she couldn't even walk to the bathroom or shower by herself. So you're put into this position as a caretaker, which I'm not a parent, right? So to parent your parents, like I'm not disciplining them in that way, but that was a really, really big identity shift. And I kind of had to fill this role really quickly. And so I have such a compassion for people who are new parents. Like I'm not even like, that's not even a baby, but I can understand it. Went off on a little tangent, but after my cousin died, that part of me was so unbelievably broken and shook. Like I didn't know what to do other than cry and feel like just immense pain. And going to Costa Rica really helped. And then I was having an integration session with a coach on a call, and I was explaining to her, because a lot of my cousin's passing came up in Costa Rica, and I was explaining all the tears and crying. And she said something really interesting that helped me. So you're obviously mourning her and her not being there with you to share, the experiences, but you're also mourning that part of you that doesn't have her anymore. And it was like, oh my God, yeah. Like, who am I without her?
Yeah.
And now this is physical, right?
Right. Yeah. And like an extreme version
of it, but everybody, I think, has experienced loss in their life. So that really hit me. It was like, okay, yep. Who am I moving forward? You're right. She's not here. Like, who do I want to be now? Because so much of what she provided for me is no longer there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of too got like the intuition and like my higher self talking, like, now give it to yourself. Like she was our biggest supporter. She was my best friend. I told her everything. It was like she supported me. She accepted me. Like I was my truest self with her. Even in the absence of you, I could fully be myself. Like we would just, like she saw me and understood me. And now this person's gone. Literally. And it was like, oh shit. And there it is. I like, give yourself what she was giving you now that she can't. And it was like, wow, okay. And it was like, all right, it's me. Like, this is me. This is my quote unquote world and my reality, like moving forward. And it just hit me in a way that, yes, I want to design or at least co-create my life in the best way that I can, knowing that I can't control everything, but surrendering and knowing that all of this has happened for my highest good.
Mhm.
It may not see it reflected out, right? Like, we're still in Massachusetts, we've still got a lot going on. There's nothing's perfect, but internally I can feel and sense and see within myself the difference, especially the different ways that I talk to myself, the different ways that I like relate to my family and like my mother and stepfather and you and your parents and everybody we've got here, my best friends that are here. It's a much different relationship when I'm able to now drop these stories about myself, my old life, and then the old stories in relation to these people who have built my identity through this ego perspective.
Yeah. So you have that moment as like an initiation.
Yeah.
To like step into sort of the version of you that is able to grieve and then like move on and transcend it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you were saying before, the ego's sole purpose is to kind of like create this narrative and this idea of who we are and then prove that it's right. And then all of a sudden, the story you had told yourself forever changed. And you were no longer that girl who could be herself with Nikki
Mm-hmm.
because Nikki was no longer physically present to provide that. So then it's like you said, so now you need to give it to yourself. And that's a really good example because it's tangible and
Yes.
physical. But with each step of our life as we change, there is the grieving of the part of ourself that was at its best in that position before. So whatever it is, you want to grow and evolve and become a better version of yourself, a different version of yourself. But the story that your ego is telling you is that you're that version that you no longer want to be. So you need to allow that version of yourself to die off because you can have any life you want, but it's going to cost you your old life. But then there's that tug of, no, I still want to be this because it's too sad to lose that part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gets really, really interesting. Even something, do it like an idea of like we talk about moving, leaving Massachusetts again, and maybe going back to California or going somewhere. And as much as I don't want to be here and would like to leave, there's still a part of me that's like sad to see the version of me who's here.
Yeah. Yes.
Lost.
Because yes.
And it becomes such a mind fuck when you want to grow, and even the part of you that's in the job it doesn't like, or the relationship it doesn't like, the part of you that just doesn't have the life that you want. It's still really, really sad to almost tell that part of yourself that it's not enough. And you get really, really sad where it's like, okay, I'm going to go start making more money. I'm going to live in a nicer house, drive a nicer car, just have a better life. And the part of you that didn't get to have that is sad and holding on. And it's like, we really struggle. And I think a lot of people just don't take steps because once they start to feel that sadness, they're not able to put it in perspective and handle the grief.
Yeah. And it is like kind of like an anxious feeling. Like you're talking about, it's really scary. And that's exactly what we were talking about. The ego wants to keep you in this one version of itself. It's safe. No, you know what's going to happen here. I remember when there's so much that's coming from this. I remember when the day we left California, like we knew we were moving to Massachusetts, and we were both hysterically crying, like on the we were on the 405, right, going to because we were going to Colorado, or no, we were going to Arizona first to see your brother, making our way across the country, and it's just it was this.
Yeah, I mean, we just sat in the car outside of our old apartment, and just cried before we even drove away. It's so hard.
Yeah, it was because a part of me, like, almost felt like, I don't want to use the word feeling, but it was like, wait, no, like, wait, what?
Yeah, like I'm not ready to not be that version.
Yes. So the reason why I bring this up is, but because like there was something in me that knew I had to go. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, this is the gut feeling. This is the intuition that like the whispers get really loud within my heart. Like, this is what I think we both talk about when we say our higher self, that intuition, really our soul knows. I think that was speaking to me when I knew that, you know, my mother had cancer. I was like, so I was going to go. I don't know. And then it was like, oh my God, that I thought we're just coming here to do that. And then my brother died. And then, so it's not like, right. I just knew something. And all of this would have made I don't even know how we would have done it in California. It just makes it, so pulling back bird's eye view, it makes sense. But I think it was like a week before we had left, I went to a bookstore with, this is how the universe works too, right? And I want to bring this up because if anybody's listening and they're like, oh, I don't know if I do this, like signs, there are signs everywhere. They don't make sense all the time in the moment, but then something like, I don't know, you're drawn to it. If you see something, if you hear something, like those are like signs. Those are inklings from the universe. Like, it's a repetition. It could be numbers. It could be anything. Conversation. Something's brought up. I was at a bookstore with Dan's brother's girlfriend, and we were walking down this aisle, and I saw Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And I was like, oh my gosh, I pulled it out. I told Nicola, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to call Dan. I want to buy this one. Like, this is what we're going to do. Like, we spent 10 years in California. Like, we literally said we were becoming the versions of us that we wanted to be. We learned so much. We grew from the people we were leaving Massachusetts as children, really kids, adapting a whole different perspective, lifestyle. And I was like, we're going to go and teach everybody. We're going to get my mom really healthy. Like, so yeah, bought the book, you know, and then literally thinking like, all right, this is the epic hero's journey. We're going, like, the hero's journey. We've been in California for 10 years now. We're going back home.
Quick 6 months to validate ourselves and show everybody how much we've learned and how smart we are. We'll save everybody, and then everything's gonna be great.
When you make plans, God laughs. I mean, really. And then our higher selves are probably like, hey, you don't even know. That obviously wasn't the case.
Right.
And a couple months ago, you must have gotten like the intuitive download or something. You literally said to me, because now everything's seeming to like somewhat go back to normal, or at least my idea of what normal is compared to the chaos that has ensued over the past 2 years. It feels better. And now we're talking and thinking about, okay, like, where's our next move? What do we go? And instead of trying to control it, we're just surrendering. Then we're open to it. We're ready. What's going to happen? Like, bring us an opportunity or show us, give us a sign or something. And you started saying, you're standing in the kitchen area, you're like, we've had this wrong the whole time. And I was like, what? And you said the hero's journey. We had it backwards. And I said, what do you mean? And you said, the hero's journey wasn't us in California for 10 years. It was this. It was this insane 18-month period of epic shit that we went through, had to see, had to feel, had to experience. That's the hero's journey. And now we're bringing that forward into this next chapter of our life. And it was like, mind blown. I was like, yeah. So like, I sort of knew about the hero's journey. Like, I thought it was one, but it turned out to be something honestly so much more significant. Because that 10-year period, although we learned a lot, it was so much different. And
I was just gonna say it's a cycle. And it's never over. You just start a new
hero's journey.
And it's like, but we were just in a different place on the cycle than we both thought we were. Which is has been amazing as far as growth and development and learning things, as terrible as it was. I think the version of myself I am now is so much further along than the version of myself I was 2 years ago. But there's also been really, really challenging. And it's been really interesting, like having this podcast through it, for example, of like trying to keep almost like this steady linear narrative while
Yes.
having absolutely no idea who I am, what is real, what is true, what is reality, like questioning everything. I've talked a few times on the podcast about thinking maybe I was going crazy.
Hmm.
It's been quite an ordeal, to use the term Joseph Campbell uses, the ordeal. It's been an extreme challenge, and it's been, yeah, just really, really difficult to understand who I am at different times, and who I am has changed. And like I said, there's been also some sort of oscillating between different versions of myself and wondering which one is, I don't know, more valid might be a way to say it, or where I'm going, or who's been making the decisions and the choices, has been a big question. I was thinking when you talked earlier about the sort of like the whispers from the higher self, I was just thinking of an analogy that Robert Gilbert uses,
Okay.
talking about the higher self
Hmm.
as this is like we're in a river. So if like we're in like a kayak or canoe going down a river,
Hmm.
and the river is time, and the canoe and us in the canoe is sort of like the present moment. And you can either focus on the canoe in the present moment. You can look ahead and kind of see a little bit of where you're going, but then there's like curves, and you can only see so far. You can turn around and you can focus on where you've been, but you can only, then there's curves there too. So you can only see a little bit of where you've been, and then you miss it because of the curves.
Mm.
So we can only really have the small section of time that we get to work with. But then our higher self is like an eagle flying above, and it sees the entire river, and it knows. So maybe there's like around the bend, there's like a waterfall. And for some reason, we're getting these pings from our higher self to like pull your canoe to the side of the riverbank, get out, carry it. It's gonna suck. This is gonna be really, really hard. But eventually you'll get through the woods, you'll get up this mountain, you'll get down, and you'll get to clear water. And maybe when you get in the water and you look back, you'll see maybe there's a waterfall there. Maybe you'll never see it. But it knows if you keep going on the route you're going, something's going to happen. You can't do it. And like we get almost like pushed into these paths and we don't know why. And it's like you're going along in canoe and you have no idea why you feel the urge to pull over and get out and carry your canoe through the woods. But for some reason, she's like, I just have to go through this thing. I have to do this. And no matter how hard it is, it's better than if you had stayed on the path you're on. And it's really, really interesting to surrender to this voice that knows, because it's not bound by time and it's not bound by, physical limitations. It can fly up and see the whole thing.
Oh, I really like that. I've never heard him say that. That's cool.
It's a really cool analogy. And it's like, I think it's really useful to put things in perspective.
Absolutely. And I think that this has just shed so much light on the very myopic view of life that I had. Like once, like getting here to, we were kind of in our LA bubble, and we were around people that thought the same, ate the same, did the same things. And it's like, how do we learn and grow from that? Honestly.
Yeah. It gets really, really, it's a lot easier to be yourself when you're surrounded by people that think similar to you and support you.
Yes.
And not to say we're not like supported here, but I feel like I'm surrounded by people that don't have the same values and sort of methods and views and sort of like lifestyle. And sorry, I cut you off.
No.
It gets a lot harder to be like, to really be true to who you are when it is like opposing everybody else rather than going with the flow.
But I think that that's one of the hugest lessons. There are so many lessons, yes. But because if you don't mind me sharing, when we did one of the hypnosis sessions for you, when I did the quantum healing hypnosis session and brought your higher self in, he said something like, if you're doing everything, if you're staying true to like who you are, then people aren't going to like you.
Yeah.
And it's really hard and it is challenging. So twofold, like this is, I think, was the huge, profound message that I received. Like, give yourself what your cousin gave to you. Like, you weren't giving it to you. It is not. So exactly, like, I have to give myself acceptance in places where people may not accept the same viewpoint or values that I have. But does that mean that I don't share who I truly am and what I truly think, that's who I was.
Mhm.
Like, or that's the story that I was petrified. And that's kind of the silliness of how I thought I could control or manipulate the way people thought of me. But that was literally killing my soul. And I haven't figured it all out. Like, I'm testing the waters and saying things and but trying to be as true to myself as I can. But, that's almost like going out into a field with thousands of people naked. Like, you've got to do like pull off one little piece of clothing at a time. Like, all right, let's see if this group, like, how they're going to respond to, my eating habits or my philosophies on the world or my philosophies on,
See, me, it
religion.
feels vulnerable. I wasn't sure where you were going with the naked field analogy. Yes, it is.
Like, okay, well, let's just maybe take your shoe off first.
Yeah.
But one of the other, like, really beautiful reflections I've had, and I'm not sure if you feel the same way. I've talked about it from my point of view, but I'm actually curious to hear what you think of it. Like, when my cousin passed, she was young. She was only 48. It was a rare form of brain cancer. So, like, obviously that was wrong with her, but there was nothing wrong with her. Like, she didn't have, she wasn't she literally died within 2 months. And they didn't even know it was brain cancer literally until a week before she died. Another story. She was our guinea pig. Like, she was someone who had very similar views on health and wellness, eating, exercising, taking care of her body. Like, she was we were really beginning to get philosophical in our views on life and all of these things. And boom, she's dead. And it's like, the fuck am I doing all this for? That's kind of the silliness that I think I can control. Like, maybe I can live till 105. I have no idea if I'll be here tomorrow. So it's like, all right, let me figure out really if I am happy the way I eat, the way I exercise, the exact routine that I do. Like, it really allowed me to go inward and say, like, do I really want to do this? Like, is it going to kill me to stop intermittent fasting? Is it going to kill me to have ice cream 3 nights a week? Is it going to, like, right? But I had built this identity around all of that. And my ego liked to tell me, like, yes, of course, that's who you are. That's who you've been for the last 5, 6, 10 years. How could you possibly think otherwise? And it's been like, this has still been an ongoing process of I'm just reevaluating what I feel is, because after Costa Rica too, that wellness trip, that was a week long. I didn't fast. We had only vegetarian and vegan food. And there was no working out other than yoga. And did that give chi and life force energy back into me? And I think I was not listening to some of the higher cues from my higher self too, because it was always talking about, like, slow down, stop working out, do yoga and all these things. But it had worked for me in the past. So I was so myopic in this narrow view of what I did. Even though it wasn't working anymore. I was gaining weight, if anything, even like busting. And then I stopped working out. When we got back to Costa Rica, all I was doing was yoga, and I felt so much better. And I started eating much differently. My hair has grown so much. I feel so, I just feel different. And so it's this kind of this beautiful thing. I listened to a video on Instagram from Lori Ladd. She's like kind of this amazing spiritual teacher, where it's like, instead of trying to change yourself, just allow the universe to gift you with an opportunity to choose differently. And I mean, how beautiful is that? Instead of trying to change yourself, just allow the universe to give you something to choose differently. And it's like, yes, okay. Well, because kind of as you're gathering your thought, change is so interesting. And I think that we can quantify and understand change from a material point of view. Like, all right, I know that I have dinner plans next Thursday night with a bunch of girlfriends. I'm going to go buy a great outfit so that I feel really confident and sexy and like done up, like when I see these girlfriends. Like, that's a change. You're outside of you trying to, buy something that
Mhm.
is going to make you feel better. It's like a tangible item. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I am a huge component of fashion. I love expressing myself in the way that we dress. But if it's coming from that, I don't feel comfortable or I don't know if I'm going to be accepted from wearing like an older outfit of mine,
Mhm.
that's the
Yeah.
manipulation that I'm trying. So it's like, okay, or go ahead.
I
See
was
what
gonna
you
say
think.
there's a very fine line there, and this is something that I've talked about a bunch. Is the placebo.
Yes, yes.
So it's like sometimes that is perfect because all you need is like one little thing to help you get back in touch with the version of yourself who you want to be. I think exercise is sort of the same way, where it's like sometimes a really hard workout and you just feel like, oh yeah, I'm the kind of person who's like jacked because I do this stuff. And then it's like your body changes because your mind changed because you did this thing. And it's like the prescription is like this certain amount of exercise that helps me, or eating in a way that helps me feel like the person, the version of myself I want to be,
Mm.
so that you can emanate more of it. It's like clothes is another great example. It's like certain items of clothing, you put it on, you feel like more of yourself. And it's like, does this thing make you feel like more of yourself or like somebody else?
Mm.
Because change is sort of like, I'm trying to look like somebody else so I get acceptance. And then buying like a dress where it's like, yes, that's me. I'm going to feel like more of myself. And I don't know if that's like
Yes.
helpful, but I think that's the way I think of it. It's like having things, and it's like a little bit here and there of the things that make you feel like more of yourself, in the same sense of like a crystal can do it. When you're like, you can meditate, or you can meditate with like a crystal or a sound, and it's like a little bit more of this frequency that you're tapping into opens you up to be more of yourself. But
Yes.
they're all just like Bashar says, they're permission slips. It's like giving yourself a permission slip to be who you want to be. And it's like that helps. But when it becomes an addiction, when it's like, okay, I can only be myself if I find the perfect dress, or else I'm not going out to dinner. Or it's like, no, I have to have this crazy workout every day and eat this specific way every single day, or I'll never be good enough. And it's like, you either get sucked into this like downward spiral of like this trap, and that's sort of the ego keeping you on this treadmill, or it's like you're the bird flying overhead and you're like, I see it all, and it's like, yeah, put on that dress, see how you feel with that on, that's who you are. And it's interesting.
It is, yes. And there's a kind of like you said, like a fine line. And it's really discovering the language of you
Mm.
and deciphering the stories that you tell yourself in your head. Like, will this, group of friends not accept me because I don't have like a new dress on? Or can I just accept myself in this moment
Mhm.
and give myself what I need? And then because I already have it, I don't need the validation or acceptance from others.
Yeah. And you don't need to go buy the dress if you can give it to yourself,
Yeah.
in the same sense. Yeah.
Or you can.
Yeah. It's not right or wrong.
Right. It's yeah, that's why I kind of feel like that's really the opportunity that I think she's talking about, like the
Yes.
universe giving to you. It's again probably not something tangible material that you might see. It's the stories. Like, listen to your inner dialogue. That's your biggest teacher. That has been my biggest teacher throughout all of this. Like, am I allowing myself to grieve? And when I do, am I criticizing myself? Am I saying, oh my gosh, I'm not doing work, I've taken a sabbatical for so long, what are people going to think? And it's like, well, no, I'm also cultivating other areas. It's everybody's internal dialogue, their stories are so profoundly helpful to understand your perception of yourself, which is your personality, which creates your personal reality,
Mhm.
as Joe Dispenza said. Everything is everything. It's just a continuous loop. And I really like, the more I can sit in silence and reflect and listen to the actual stories that I tell myself, is the best way to know who I am or know who I'm not. Because I'm beginning to understand half of what I tell myself isn't actually me. It's culturally programmed or from caregivers, parents, siblings, friends, teachers. Where you live is a huge part, like all of this.
Yeah. And it's like learning to decipher the different voices in a sense of knowing, like you mentioned before, like the whispers of your higher self.
Yes, exactly.
And like hearing, okay, there's something telling me I need to do this versus that like screaming in your head of like whatever, like do this, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And it's like, and it's not always a negative voice, it's not always saying like no, it's like, but there's like, what is it that's telling me to do this? Who's talking right now? Who's controlling the narrative? Is it my higher self or is it the ego? So it's like the analogy I used before, like you're in this canoe and you hear like this whisper saying like, get out of the canoe and just walk through the woods. But there's probably also on the other side a voice being like, paddle harder, you're not good enough, paddle harder. And it's like, we want to do that, then we're just going to end up going off a cliff. That's like finding how to perceive the difference and know when that voice is really you.
Yeah.
Versus, like you said, like just conditioning or programming that we've picked up along the way.
Yeah. And, I feel like what I just want to come across like for this episode is that if we allow and grant ourselves permission to change, that allows other people permission to change too. And I think that that's really important because as scary as this has been for like me to see me be differently, like there is a part of me that's constantly analyzing what other people are going to think, especially you too. We've been together 20 years. I know that you've seen lots of different versions of me, but it's like, oh gosh, she's going to meet this new version. And I don't even know who she is yet. And I see that all the time. I don't know who I am. But it's kind of like a really beautiful journey when you surrender to it. Because I've realized that the more that I try to control things, the more shitty things have happened. And it's like, all right, I'm putting my hands up. Like I've got nothing. I can't possibly control any situation in my life. I can try, and that's what I'm trying to do. I can try to control the thoughts that I have. And really, instead of negativity, doom and gloom, worst case scenarios, like woe me, like I will say, I do think I have a really good perspective, even though we've been through a really shitty 2 years. And that's helped. It really has, because I feel if I was on that kind of negative wavelength of why did this happen? Like, oh my gosh, like, it's like, I still don't know why it happened again. Like I probably will never know other than like an initiation, and it's part of being human. And I think that there's going to be a lot of stuff that we get to do from this, like the experience that we've gained, the insight that we've gained, like helping us like in ways that I can't I can't see it right now, but I feel it. And so, yeah, it's kind of just this life that we're in seems to be very short. And it's making the best of it despite of what's going on, or despite of the circumstances that you're in. It can be different. You can transform and change. But it all starts internally.
Yeah. You were saying before, like the idea of control. And then I think along with the idea of trying to control your reality and control everything that's happening around you, you start to really focus on the choices that like, oh, is this the right choice? Am I doing the right thing? Is this right? And I like what you said, where it's like, all you can really try to control is the thoughts that you're entertaining about a thing. And I kind of had that realization at some point pretty recently, where, so, the idea like, am I making the right choice? Doesn't matter. The choice is the choice. And I don't even know if I'm in control of making it. But what I can do is make the choice right by not allowing myself to make it wrong, not allowing myself to spiral into, oh no, I made the wrong choice. It's just like, yeah, this is the right choice. The choice has been made. This is what we're going to do, and it is going to be perfect. And when I say perfect, I don't mean like everything's going to go right. I mean like perfect in the sense that like this is exactly what I need for my development to become the person who I'm becoming. And it's like I'm choosing the excitement of the new, and I'm choosing to take this step and make it right and be like, yep, absolutely, this is what's happening. It's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it being able to experience everything is experience in life.
Yeah.
And I think that I've been hugely impacted by my own experience, but then watching other people have their experience of reality, like I'm able to not to, take things so personally. Like I know how I feel in a situation, so I can only imagine how you feel, how this person feels, or how that friend feels, how that family member feels, and it's like, but it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As sad as that one may be, it's like we've got to go through it too.
Yeah.
And
Couldn't have been
whatever,
any other way.
exactly, whatever may come on the other side of it, it's exactly what they need for their growth and evolution.
Yeah. There's definitely, and we were talking about like the idea of like coming back to Massachusetts and like saving people.
I know.
Like looking back now, it's crazy. But
No, yeah.
and it's like what I feel like what I've learned is that there's absolutely nothing I can do that's going to change what anybody else does.
Yeah.
And it's like all I can do is be true to who I am, which gets complicated when you're not really sure who you are. But it's like if you're so worried about changing everybody else to make yourself comfortable, then you'll never figure out who you actually are.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas like
yes.
you need to have the friction and brush up against things so you can be like, oh, okay, why did that happen? You were kind of mentioning before about the idea of like this life is short, do the things that you want to do. And I almost like the examples like that you give, like having ice creams, like yeah, I love ice cream, but I also feel like over the last couple of years, um, I've been kind of more lenient with myself, and like same way, like especially like in this past year, is maybe like fasting less and eating different kinds of food, and I don't. I part of me feels like it's like okay, the experiment's over, get back to being you.
Interesting.
In the sense that like I feel like I've been, I don't know if letting myself down is wrong, but it's like almost like it was like a good test. It's like to see, okay, like would you rather just have ice cream all the time, or do you want to get back to really making sure that the food you're eating is dialed in and that you're doing all the things? And it's been interesting where it's like I don't feel as good as I felt when I was being a little bit stricter and more disciplined with myself, which is just really interesting. And it's like we don't both have to agree on that, obviously. But I think that in that, finding balance too, because it's like all I want to do is like live my life. So if that does mean like having a bowl of ice cream, making sure that when I have that ice cream, I enjoy the fuck out of it. And it's like just really being like savoring in the moment that I'm having ice cream. And when I'm not having ice cream, to feel really good about how I'm not having, and be able to do both of those things and embrace both of those. I don't know if that, and hopefully that sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like it's been a really interesting experiment to test out if the things I've been doing and learning are in alignment with who I am, or if I was just putting restrictions on myself for no reason, where the idea of like, I could die tomorrow, so eat all the cake and ice cream now makes sense. But I also think like I could die tomorrow. I want to feel as good as I possibly could right now. So I'm going to make sure that I'm spending time in the sun, that I'm barefoot, that I'm working out, that I'm eating well, so that I can sit back and be like, I feel really, really good. And I think that that's just like, we all have our things.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really, really interesting, but I don't think there's a right or wrong.
No, of course
Either
there's
way,
not a right or wrong.
it's about being true to ourselves.
Yeah.
And then allowing other people around you to do whatever they want. Because why would I be able to do whatever I want if other people can't do whatever they want?
Right.
Or be themselves? Why would I, if I don't allow everybody I meet to be themselves in every moment, then how could I ever be myself?
Right.
So if I'm trying to change people, like, no, you got to eat like this, you got to exercise like this, you got to live like this, then I need to be somebody else at the same time. So it's like, I think there's a lot of really, really interesting things. I'm not sure if I'm sort of articulating exactly what I'm trying to say right now in the best way, but it's a thought I've been having a lot about, just allowing everybody to be themselves and then still being able to be an example. Like, so like as a coach, it gets complicated because people want to hire me to improve their health and their body and their wellness.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you probably are going to need to make some changes, but rather than just giving everybody sort of like a cookie cutter plan, it's like, let's figure out exactly the right balance for you to be more of you, not more of me or more of some other ideal. And I think that that's been sort of really powerful and a really interesting lesson to learn and perspective to put things in.
Yeah. And well, I think that that's really important. And I was listening to a podcast as you're talking about this, and this woman was saying, you know, she's a coach and she was talking to another coach. And she was saying that one of her clients had asked her, how do I find a good coach or a good therapist or a good like mentor or something? And she said, the best coach, therapist, mentor you're going to find is someone who also does the work themselves. And I think that that is a very big part of your journey. Like, you help people, but they're really coaching you in the same way, kind of like you were saying.
Absolutely.
So yes, absolutely. I think we found very quick on in our coaching people that the same diet lifestyle as us does not work for everybody. We found that out very quickly. And it's like, of course, everybody's unique. They have different, you know, genes and different, all of those things. And it's being adaptable and then, you know, working on your stories and your values and like what's worked with one of your clients doesn't work with other ones. And I think that that's important. So that, it's, I know nothing. I had that download in Costa Rica. I am just here to like share my experiences and like, they're all of our experiences are unique. All of our stories are different. All of our thoughts are different, but yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of times, like I said before, it's like learning to distinguish the difference in that voice of, do I feel this urge to do this thing because I've been like shamed into it, guilted into it, programmed into it, I'm afraid not to? Or is this voice a future version of me calling me to him to be like, this is the next step. Are you ready? And it's like that next step goes from being really, really scary to really, really exciting when you connect it to the version of yourself that's calling you to him or to her.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm kind of glad you said that as we wrap up. It's like, that's what I feel like. I feel a big call for something, like something new is going to happen. We're ready for this next journey. And it's like, it can't possibly be as bad as this last one, right? Like it's preparing us for what's, and now I'm going in even more like eager and excited. It's like, okay, I've been through some shit. I know I can handle a lot of things. Like exactly, like it's an initiation. It was, and it's like, now it's like, all right, I can't see the entire path. I can only see like a little bit. It's like, let's do this.
Yeah. That's like you started out saying you can have any life you want, but it's going to cost you your old life. And I think it really comes down to like the choices and the narrative is what you need to give up. It's not all the physical things. And it's not even the people, like you said before. Like if I want to go start a new life, the person I'm going to share it with is a different version of you.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
you said, you're going to keep changing. So it's like, so there's the thing, the situation in the future that I get worried about is an illusion, because it's not going to be me dealing with it, and it's not going to be you who's there with them. So
Right, we'll be different people.
yeah, so it's like I just need to. Making it right is making sure that the version that I am at that point is the one who can handle it, and that means allowing that part of me to emerge and not continually falling back on the same choices that I used to make based on who I used to be.
Yes, 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 yes. I love it.